Forgotten by the stars. The galaxy was vast, stretching beyond what the mind could imagine. Hundreds of planets, star systems, and civilizations teemed within its endless expanse. Yet, amidst all the shining stars and the chaos of interstellar politics, there was one small planet that the galaxy had forgotten: Earth. For centuries, Earth had been a quiet, almost insignificant place in the universe. While the stars danced above, humanity lived their simple lives, unaware of the grand cosmic theater unfolding just beyond their atmosphere. The Earth was not a world of great power, nor was it a world of advanced technology. It was, however, a world full of hope, strength, and determination. But the galaxy had long passed Earth by, laughing at its primitive ways. The Galactic Empire, a massive and powerful force in the universe, considered Earth little more than a speck of dust. In their eyes, humanity was nothing more than a species that had not yet learned how to reach the stars. They saw no threat in the blue planet, dismissing it as unimportant. But there was one human who did not share this view. His name was Captain Marcus Kane, a veteran of Earth's military forces, and he had always believed in Earth's potential. He had seen the strength and resolve in his fellow humans, and he knew deep down that humanity could rise to any challenge. Yet even he could not ignore the truth. Earth was forgotten by the stars. Captain Kane often stood alone in the quiet of his command room, staring out at the stars. He could feel the weight of Earth's neglect on his shoulders. The Galactic Empire's presence was everywhere, and their fleets cruised through the galaxy, making decisions for all races, dictating terms, and enforcing their will. Earth was nothing but a distant memory to them, a mere footnote in the history of the universe. Yet Marcus Kane knew that the situation was about to change. A new force was emerging on Earth. People were waking up to the reality of their situation, and they were beginning to realize that they could no longer stay hidden in the shadows. The time for change had come, and it would not be long before humanity would make its presence known. One day, the news came. The Galactic Empire had sent a delegation to Earth, a group of diplomats to negotiate Earth's future. This was not a visit for peaceful cooperation, but an ultimatum. The Empire demanded that Earth surrender its resources and pledge allegiance to their rule. Earth was to become a mere colony of the Galactic Empire, a place to be exploited like so many others before it. The announcement shook the world. Governments, military forces, and civilians alike felt the tremors of fear and anger. How could the Empire think they could just take over Earth? People had lived their lives thinking they were safe from the larger galaxy. But now, reality had arrived at their doorstep, and the galaxy had finally noticed Earth. Marcus Kane was not surprised by the announcement. He had known this day would come, but he also knew that this would be the moment when humanity would either rise or fall. The question was, would they fight, or would they surrender? The people of Earth were divided. Some were terrified, convinced that resistance was futile. They thought the Empire's ships were too powerful, their weapons too advanced, and their fleets too numerous. Earth had no hope of winning a war against such a mighty force. Others, however, were ready for battle. They had had enough of being overlooked, forgotten, and underestimated. They refused to let their home be turned into a mere prize for the taking. They remembered the stories of Earth's resilience, of the times when humanity had defied the odds and overcome the greatest challenges. It was that very spirit that stirred within them now. Captain Kane, a man who had seen war firsthand, knew that humanity's best chance lay in their unity. He called for an emergency meeting with Earth's military leaders, scientists, and engineers. Together, they would begin the work of preparing Earth for the challenge ahead. Kane knew that they could not rely on conventional weapons alone. They would need something more. They would need to awaken Earth's hidden potential, the secret strength that lay dormant in their ancient history. As the days passed, the world began to change. The Earth that had once been so quiet and unnoticed was now a planet in turmoil. People began to rally to the cause, no longer afraid to stand up for their future. A new force was being born, one that would defy the odds and face the Empire head-on. But the Galactic Empire was not idle. They had seen the stirrings of resistance and knew that humanity would not bow down easily. Their fleets were already on their way, and the Empire's generals were confident that Earth would submit without a fight. They had crushed countless worlds before, and they saw no reason why Earth would be any different. The Empire's confidence was their greatest mistake. Marcus Kane stood at the front of the command center, looking out over the operations table. He could see the determination in the eyes of the men and women who had joined him in the fight. They were not soldiers, nor had they ever been, but they were ready to do what needed to be done. They were ready to fight for their home. As the news of Earth's preparations spread, something began to shift in the hearts of humanity. They were no longer just a forgotten species. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the stars that had once ignored them would soon have to reckon with Earth. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity. Earth was not a planet to be conquered. It was a planet to be respected. And the time for humanity to show the galaxy their true strength had finally come. But first, they had to survive the storm that was coming. The stars would never be the same again. The universe moved in mysterious ways, its forces swirling like a storm waiting to strike. And in the darkness of space, something was brewing. The Galactic Empire, believing their vast power to be unrivaled, had sent their fleets to Earth without a second thought. They expected an easy victory, a simple submission from a small, insignificant world. But they had underestimated something far greater than they could have imagined. Humanity's will to fight. On Earth, Captain Marcus Kane stood at the heart of Earth's new war effort. It had been weeks since the Empire's ultimatum, and time was running out. The preparations were moving at a feverish pace, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. Earth was outmatched. The Empire's warships were enormous, bristling with weaponry, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. But Kane was not afraid. The same fire that burned in his heart now blazed in the hearts of millions. Humanity had something that the Empire could not understand: the power of determination, the force of will. They had been forgotten for too long. And now, they would make sure the galaxy would never forget them again. In every corner of Earth, people rallied. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked together day and night to build a defense that could stand against the Empire's might. The military leaders were experienced, but they knew they needed more than just advanced weapons. They needed to tap into Earth's hidden potential. That potential lay not in their technology, but in their ingenuity, their ability to adapt and evolve in the face of the impossible. Marcus Kane was overseeing the final stages of Earth's preparations when a transmission came through. It was from the leader of the Galactic Empire's fleet, General Zorath, a cold and ruthless commander who had crushed countless civilizations without mercy. His message was brief but chilling. Humanity has been given its chance. Surrender now, or face complete annihilation. Your resistance will be nothing but a fleeting memory in the great expanse of the universe. Kane felt a cold shiver down his spine as the transmission ended. He knew that the Empire had no intention of negotiating, no intention of peace. The storm was coming, and it was coming with the full force of the Empire's wrath. Earth had no choice but to stand and fight. But Kane didn't flinch. He turned to his team of advisors, the brightest minds Earth had to offer. They had prepared for this moment, but now, with the enemy at their doorstep, it was time to face the impossible. "We can't let them think we're weak," Kane said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We have to show them that humanity won't go down without a fight. We'll use everything we have, every ounce of strength." His words were not just for his team, but for himself as well. He had led many missions, fought in many battles, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity mattered, that they were not just a forgotten species. They had a place in this universe, and they would fight for it. The Empire's fleet was approaching Earth, and time was running out. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, aboard the lead ship of the Galactic Empire's fleet, General Zorath watched the planet Earth closely through his viewing screen. His pale, Emotionless eyes narrowed as he observed the human defenses slowly taking shape. It was clear that humanity was trying to prepare for war, but to Zorath, it was nothing more than a futile attempt to delay the inevitable. They have no idea what they're up against, Zorath thought, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. No amount of resistance can stand against the might of the Empire. Their cities will burn, their people will fall. Earth will become another colony under our rule, just like all the others before it. But Zorath's overconfidence was his first mistake. He believed that the Empire's power was absolute, that no force in the galaxy could challenge their might. What he didn't understand was the human spirit, the strength of a people who had been pushed to their limits and refused to back down. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their ships or weapons, but their unyielding will to survive. Back on Earth, Marcus Kane and his team were finalizing their plan. The defense systems were in place, and the underground bunkers were stocked with supplies. But their most important asset was still hidden away, something the Empire would never expect. Kane had always known that humanity's true power didn't lie in conventional warfare. They needed something more, something that would catch the Empire off guard. The hidden weapon was something humanity had uncovered deep within Earth's history. Long before the Empire had come to the galaxy, ancient human civilizations had built vast warships that could rival anything the Empire possessed. These ships, though long thought to be relics of a forgotten time, had been carefully preserved by humanity. And now, they were ready to be unleashed. These ships, older than any of the Empire's fleet, had been designed with technology that no one had seen in millennia. Their weapons were powerful, their shields unbreakable. And most importantly, they were built to survive against overwhelming odds. They were a symbol of humanity's resilience, a reminder of their strength. As the first of the Empire's ships entered Earth's atmosphere, the hidden warships were launched from beneath the surface. They rose from their secret hangars, cloaked in advanced stealth technology. The human ships, though old, moved with an elegance and speed that the Empire had not anticipated. They emerged from the darkness, striking without warning. The Empire's fleet was caught off guard. Their advanced sensors couldn't detect the hidden ships, and their military commanders were scrambling to respond. But it was too late. The humans had already made their move. The battle was fierce, and the sky above Earth erupted in flames as humanity's warships collided with the Empire's fleet. The sound of weapons fire echoed across space as the two forces clashed in a way that no one had ever thought possible. The Empire's ships, massive and powerful, seemed invincible, but the humans fought with something they could never understand: desperation, anger, and the will to protect their home. Captain Kane watched the battle unfold from the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always known that humanity's strength lay in their spirit, but now he was witnessing it firsthand. The Earth had been forgotten by the stars, but now it was showing them what it was capable of. And as the battle raged on, one thing became clear: humanity would no longer be ignored. The storm had arrived, and it was about to change the galaxy forever. The sky above Earth burned with the fury of battle. Laser fire streaked across the void, and explosions lit up the darkness like dying stars. Humanity, once thought to be weak and insignificant, had risen from the shadows to challenge the Galactic Empire. The war had begun. Captain Marcus Kane stood at the command center, watching the battlefield unfold on the massive holographic display. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the console as he observed the chaotic dance of destruction. The hidden warships, humanity's last hope, had been unleashed, and their presence had turned what should have been an easy invasion into a bloodbath. The Empire had not expected resistance, let alone an ambush of this scale. Their fleet, though vast, had suffered heavy losses in the opening moments of the battle. The ancient human warships, once relics of a forgotten era, had proven to be the equal of anything the Empire had brought. They'd moved with precision, their weapons tearing through the invaders with ruthless efficiency. But the battle was far from won. The Empire still had the advantage in numbers, and for every enemy warship that fell, more took its place. Humanity was fighting with everything they had, but the Empire's might was relentless. Status report. Kane barked, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. A young officer, sweat beading on his forehead, turned from his console. "Sir, our forces have destroyed 26 enemy vessels, but they're adapting. Their capital ships are shifting formations, using their size to shield the smaller fighters." Kane cursed under his breath. The Empire was learning. He had expected this, but it didn't make the situation any easier. If they allowed the enemy to regroup, the battle would turn against them. "We need to break their formation," Kane said, turning to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn. "Tell the fleet to target their command ships. If we cut off the head, the body will crumble." Vaughn nodded sharply and relayed the order. Across the battlefield, human warships adjusted their strategy. Instead of engaging the Empire's front lines, they focused on the command vessels, large, heavily armored ships that coordinated the enemy fleet's movements. The first strike hit home. A squadron of human bombers broke through the defensive perimeter and unleashed a devastating barrage of missiles against one of the Empire's command ships. The vessel, caught off guard, erupted into flames before shattering into 1,000 pieces. The enemy fleet hesitated. Their movements faltered. Kane saw his opportunity. "Now, all units, push forward." The human fleet surged, pressing the attack. The Empire's forces, momentarily thrown into confusion, struggled to reorganize. More of their ships fell, torn apart by the relentless assault. But the victory was not without cost. An explosion rocked the command center, sending a tremor through the station. The lights flickered, and warning alarms blared. Kane barely had time to steady himself before a voice came through the speakers. One of their outposts had been destroyed. "Sir, we've lost the Artemis. The enemy's flagship just obliterated it." Kane turned to the display and felt his stomach tighten. The Empire's flagship, a behemoth of a warship, was now leading the counterattack. It moved through the battlefield like a predator, its massive cannons firing devastating energy blasts that tore through human ships like paper. "Their flagship is too strong," Vaughn said, her expression grim. "If we don't do something, they'll tear us apart." Kane's mind raced. They couldn't outgun that thing, not directly. But maybe they didn't have to. A plan began to form, a desperate gambit that could change everything, or doom them all. He turned to his officers. "Prepare the Retribution." A heavy silence filled the room. The Retribution was one of the oldest and most powerful ships humanity had kept hidden, a dreadnought from an era long past, armed with a weapon so dangerous that it had been locked away for centuries. "Sir," Vaughn said hesitantly, "are you sure? The Retribution has never been tested in real combat." Kane met her gaze. "It's now or never." The order was given. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a hidden facility, the last of humanity's greatest weapons roared to life. The ground trembled as the Retribution, an enormous battleship nearly the size of a city, rose from its underground hangar. Its hull was marked with scars of ancient wars, and its weapon systems glowed with raw, untamed power. As it broke through the atmosphere, the battlefield seemed to pause. Even the Empire's forces hesitated as they beheld the monstrous ship now emerging before them. It was like nothing they had ever seen, its very presence radiating an aura of destruction. From aboard the flagship, General Zorath narrowed his eyes. He had expected resistance, but this was something different. "What is that?" he muttered. His officers scrambled for answers, but none came. The Empire's databases had no record of such a vessel. Then the Retribution fired. A beam of energy, burning brighter than a star, erupted from its core. It sliced through space with terrifying speed, striking the Empire's flagship dead center. The shields held for only a second before they collapsed. The ship trembled, its armor melting away like wax before a flame. Aboard the enemy flagship, alarms blared. Systems failed. The mighty warship, the symbol of the Empire's power, was now nothing more than a burning wreck. And then, in an instant, it was gone. The explosion that followed was seen across the battlefield. The Empire's forces, witnessing the destruction of their strongest vessel, faltered. Their confidence shattered. Kane watched it all unfold, his heart pounding. They had done it. They had struck a blow the Empire would never forget. But the battle was not over. The Empire, though wounded, was still a force to be reckoned with. Their remaining ships were regrouping, preparing for a second wave. Kane took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. The war was far from won. But for the first time, he felt something the Empire never expected humanity to have: hope. And the galaxy would never forget them again. The universe, vast and unyielding, had watched as Earth stood against the might of the Galactic Empire. The battle was far from over, but humanity had already left its mark. General Zorath, once confident in his empire's supremacy, now faced a reality he could scarcely comprehend. Earth had struck back with a force no one had anticipated. And the galaxy, silent and distant, felt the echo of that defiance. The dust from the explosion of the Empire's flagship, the Imperial Wraith, still lingered in space. The Empire's fleet, once a well-oiled machine of war, was now fractured and in disarray. But they were not a species to accept defeat so easily. They would regroup, they would retaliate, and they would do it with the full fury of their vast war machine. Back on Earth, Captain Marcus Kane stood in the control center, staring at the holographic displays that flickered in front of him. The enemy had suffered a major blow, but the cost to humanity was not small. The Retribution, their last hope and their greatest weapon, had sustained damage in its attack. It had been a gamble, and while it had paid off in the short term, the ship was now grounded for repairs. The rest of the fleet, though victorious in the moment, had lost key vessels, and the Empire would soon return for revenge. "Sir," Vaughn's voice cut through the tension. She stepped forward, a grim expression on her face. "Our forces are holding, but the Empire isn't backing down. They're preparing for another strike. We need to think ahead, or we'll lose the momentum we've gained." Kane nodded, his mind racing. The Empire was known for its ruthlessness, its ability to absorb loss and retaliate with terrifying speed. They would come again, and when they did, it would be with all their might. The question was not if, but when. "We need to force their hand," Kane said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We can't wait for them to regroup and come at us in full force. We need to strike first." Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "You want us to go on the offensive?" Kane's gaze hardened. "Exactly. But not just any offensive. We need to hit them where it hurts. Their command structure, their supply lines. The Empire has made the mistake of underestimating us, thinking we're just a minor annoyance in their quest for domination. Let's prove them wrong." Vaughn thought for a moment. "That's a bold move, Captain. If we go after their supply chains, we risk spreading our forces too thin. And without the Retribution, we'll be facing them at less than full strength." "I know," Kane replied. "But we have to strike now, while they're weak. If we wait, they'll have time to regroup and rebuild. We have one shot at this." A heavy silence filled the room as Kane's officers processed the gravity of the decision. They had all known that this war would be dangerous, that the odds were against them. But now, with the Empire reeling from their first major defeat, they had an opportunity they couldn't afford to squander. "Get me the fleet commanders," Kane said, his voice firm. "We move out in 1 hour." Meanwhile, aboard the flagship of the Galactic Empire, General Zorath seethed with rage. The loss of the Imperial Wraith had been a blow to his pride, and the Empire's military standing had been shaken. His enemies, the humans of Earth, had dared to defy him, to take down his greatest ship with a single strike. It was inconceivable. "Sir, we've completed our analysis of the battle," a young officer reported, stepping forward with a datapad. The humans' weapon, the one they call the Retribution, has been grounded for repairs. Their fleet is also weakened, but they are still capable of further attacks. Zorath turned to face him, his eyes narrowing. We have underestimated them. These humans are more resilient than we thought. The officer hesitated. They've already begun moving again, sir. Reports indicate they're assembling a strike force, targeting our supply lines. Zorath's lip curled into a sinister smile. They think they can hit us where it hurts, but they've forgotten something very important. We are the Empire. We do not simply fall to the whims of upstart species. He turned to his second-in-command, a ruthless lieutenant known for his brutal tactics. Prepare the fleet. We will not let them strike again. The humans will learn their place in the galaxy. This time, we will crush them. Back on Earth, the fleet had assembled. The final preparations were being made for the offensive that could turn the tide of the war. Kane stood before the command staff, a map of the galaxy projected before him, with key Empire supply depots and command centers highlighted. They would need to strike quickly before the Empire could fully regroup. We have one shot at this, Kane said, his voice steady. We'll move in fast, hit them hard, and leave before they can respond. Our goal is simple. Take out their supplies, disrupt their command structure, and leave them scrambling. This is our chance to break their hold on the galaxy. The officers nodded in agreement. They knew the stakes. If they failed, Earth would become a target for the Empire's unrelenting wrath. But if they succeeded, they would strike a blow that could change the course of the war. The fleet lifted off, leaving Earth behind, as it ventured deeper into the galaxy. The human ships moved with purpose, their course set for a major supply depot, located on the edge of Empire-controlled space. The strike would be swift, the attack coordinated with surgical precision. As they approached the depot, Kane's heart raced. This was it. The attack had to be flawless. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. All ships, engage, Kane ordered. The human fleet swooped in, launching their assault with precision. Lasers and missiles streaked across the sky as the first wave of fighters slammed into the depot's defenses. The Empire's supply lines, already stretched thin, were now under attack. The human ships moved like a swarm of hornets, striking with brutal efficiency. In the heart of the Empire's command center, Zorath watched the chaos unfold, his fists clenched in fury. Prepare the counteroffensive, he growled. We will not allow these vermin to destroy everything we've worked for. But it was already too late. The human strike force had accomplished its mission. The supply depot was in ruins, the command center shattered, and the Empire's forces were scrambling to respond. The humans had once again proven that they were not the weak, helpless species the Empire had thought them to be. As the human fleet withdrew, victorious for the moment, Kane allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had struck another blow against the Empire, one that would be felt across the galaxy. But he knew better than anyone that the Empire would not take this defeat lying down. The storm was far from over, but for the first time in the war, humanity had truly shown the galaxy that they were not a force to be forgotten. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Empire would never be the same. The victory was short-lived, but the echoes of humanity's triumph reverberated through the galaxy. The Empire's response was swift, furious, and inevitable. Their pride had been wounded, their fleet humiliated, and their strongest forces, those they had once considered invincible, had been brought to their knees by humanity's hidden strength. The time for retribution had arrived. Back on Earth, Captain Marcus Kane stood on the observation deck of the command station, gazing out at the stars. His mind was heavy with the weight of their victory and the burden of what was to come. The Empire would not forgive what had been done to them. They would come, and they would come hard. Sir, Lieutenant Vaughn's voice broke through his thoughts. We've received a communication from the fleet. The Empire is mobilizing at full strength. They're preparing to launch a massive counterattack. Kane turned to face her, his expression hardening. I expected as much. They're going to throw everything they have at us. Vaughn nodded. We've already started strengthening our defenses, but it's clear that we won't be able to hold indefinitely if they come with their full force. We need to prepare for the worst. Kane's mind raced as he absorbed the news. The Empire was preparing for a war of annihilation. They weren't just angry anymore. They were desperate. And desperation meant they would stop at nothing to crush the humans and reassert their dominance. We need to buy ourselves time. Kane said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. We can't let them land a decisive blow. Our fleet has to hold, no matter what. Vaughn's eyes darkened with concern. And if they breach our defenses? Kane didn't need to answer. He knew the consequences. If the Empire managed to strike Earth itself, it would be the end of their resistance. The planet would be destroyed, and humanity's struggle would be over. We can't let that happen, he said, his voice firm. Tell the fleet to brace for impact. We're going to make them regret underestimating us. On the other side of the galaxy, General Zorath seethed with rage aboard his flagship, the Imperial Tyrant. The loss of the Imperial Wraith had been a blow to his ego, but the destruction of the supply depot, an operation meant to cripple the human resistance, had sent shockwaves through the Empire. It was clear now that Earth was no longer just a nuisance. Humanity had become a threat. General, his top advisor, Commander Riva, spoke up. The humans have made a grave mistake. They dared to strike at the heart of the Empire. The retaliation will be swift and decisive. We'll crush them. Zorath's cold eyes burned with hatred. Crush them. No, Riva. We will make them suffer. We will make them understand that no species defies the Empire and lives to tell the tale. We will leave nothing of Earth but a smoldering ruin. He turned to his tactical officer, a young officer with a sharp mind. Prepare the fleet. We leave for Earth in 2 hours. The officer hesitated. But, sir, our fleet is still recovering from the last battle. We're not at full strength. Zorath's gaze was icy. Then we move anyway. The longer we wait, the more the humans will prepare. We strike now, while they're vulnerable. Back on Earth, the preparations were underway. The human fleet had barely managed to hold their ground against the Empire's first wave, and now they faced the daunting task of holding Earth's orbit against an enemy that was preparing for total war. The message was clear. This would not be a battle of equal forces. The Empire would come with everything they had. Kane stood in the command center, watching the data poured in. The enemy fleet was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Zorath had clearly thrown caution to the wind, betting everything on this final strike. Status report, Kane said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. The officer at the console spoke quickly. Sir, the Empire's fleet is en route. They're moving faster than expected. They'll be within our range in less than 3 hours. Kane's mind raced. They didn't have much time. The fleet was not at full strength. Too many ships had been damaged in the previous battles, and with the Retribution still out of commission, they didn't have their strongest weapon in play. But there was still hope. We can't let them reach Earth, Kane said, his voice cold with determination. We'll have to stop them here, in the void, before they get any closer. Prepare the fleet for combat. Vaughn stepped forward, her face drawn with concern. We're outnumbered, Captain. Even if we engage them head-on, it'll be a massacre. We need a strategy. Kane nodded, his expression resolute. We hit them with everything we've got. We'll spread their forces thin, confuse them, and take advantage of the terrain. We'll make them fight for every inch of space, and most importantly, we'll make them believe they're winning until it's too late. The battle began in the cold vastness of space, a fight between two forces locked in an epic struggle for survival. The Empire's fleet loomed like a dark storm cloud, a sea of warships, dreadnoughts, and battle cruisers. But humanity, though outnumbered, was not without its advantages. The human fleet was small and agile, able to maneuver through the battlefield with speed and precision. The first salvo of laser fire lit up the sky as the two fleets clashed. Explosions rocked the vacuum of space, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Empire's ships were enormous and heavily armored, their weapons powerful enough to tear through human vessels with ease. But humanity fought with a desperation and cunning that the Empire had never anticipated. Kane watched the holographic display with grim satisfaction as human warships dove into the fray, launching barrages of missiles and laser fire. The Empire was not unprepared, of course. They countered with precision, bringing their firepower to bear. But the humans were not aiming to win through brute force. They were aiming to survive long enough to outlast the Empire's aggression. The battle raged on for hours. The Empire's ships, though superior in size and strength, began to feel the weight of their losses. Human vessels, though smaller and more fragile, fought with a ferocity that was impossible to ignore. They used their speed to their advantage, drawing the Empire's ships into traps, exploiting every weakness in their formation. But despite humanity's best efforts, the Empire's might was overwhelming. One by one, human ships fell, their wreckage scattered across the black void. The battle was slipping away from them. Kane felt the pressure mounting as the battle wore on. They had fought bravely, but it was clear that the Empire's resources were endless, while the humans were running out of options. "Sir," Vaughn said, her voice strained, "our fleet is losing cohesion. We can't keep up this pace much longer. We need to think of something fast." Kane's eyes narrowed. He had one final trick to play, one last card to draw. "Prepare the Phoenix." Vaughn's eyes widened. "The Phoenix? Are you sure?" Kane nodded. "If we're going to turn the tide of this battle, we need a miracle." The Phoenix was humanity's last-ditch weapon, a ship of unimaginable power, equipped with technology that even the Empire could not comprehend. It had been hidden, protected from the Empire's prying eyes. But now, it was humanity's only hope. As the Empire's fleet closed in for the kill, the Phoenix emerged from the shadows, its engines roaring to life as it launched toward the enemy. Kane looked up at the display with a glimmer of hope. "This is it. Our last stand." The Phoenix sliced through the dark void of space like a bolt of lightning, its engines glowing with a bright, intense blue. The massive warship, humanity's last hope, had remained hidden for years, its presence unknown to even the most advanced alien forces. Now it was ready to unleash its wrath upon the Empire. The entire galaxy would witness the power that humans had kept in reserve. As the Phoenix broke free from Earth's orbit, the remaining ships of humanity's fleet looked on in awe. They had fought valiantly, but the battle had clearly shifted in favor of the Empire. Now their final weapon was in play, their last desperate chance to turn the tide. Captain Marcus Kane stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls of the Phoenix. His face was grim, yet a flicker of hope glinted in his eyes. They had fought for this moment. Every battle, every sacrifice, had led to this point. Humanity's survival depended on what would happen in the next few minutes. "Ready the weapons," Kane ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We need to hit them hard and fast." Lieutenant Vaughn, standing beside him, looked at the tactical readouts with concern. "Sir, their fleet is still overwhelming. The Empire's ships are closing in. We're outnumbered. This will not be an easy fight." Kane's expression hardened. "I didn't come here to make things easy. The Phoenix is humanity's last shot. We use it wisely, or we lose everything." With a deep breath, Vaughn nodded. She understood the stakes. The Phoenix was humanity's ultimate weapon, capable of dealing damage far beyond anything the Empire had faced. But it wasn't invincible. It had its limits. The odds were still stacked against them. Meanwhile, aboard the Imperial Tyrant, General Zorath stood before his massive command console, his cold eyes watching as the human fleet made its final stand. He could feel the triumph in his grasp. The human resistance had been crushed. Their fleet was in shambles, and now their ultimate weapon was in play. But he didn't believe for a moment that a single ship could turn the tide. The Phoenix would be destroyed along with the rest of their forces. It was only a matter of time. "General," Commander Riva said, her voice betraying a hint of unease, "the human ship, it's unlike anything we've encountered. The power readings, they're off the charts. It's more advanced than we were led to believe." Zorath dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Let them play their final card. It will be the last mistake they make." His fingers hovered over the command console, and he sent a direct order to his fleet. "Engage the Phoenix at full power. We end this now." As the Phoenix surged forward into the heart of the battlefield, its massive form appeared to shimmer as it cloaked itself briefly, evading the Empire's initial sensors. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it decloaked, unleashing a salvo of devastating plasma cannons. The blasts cut through the void like knives, tearing into the nearest Empire ships. Explosions erupted, sending debris scattering across space. The Empire's fleet faltered for a moment, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught. The Phoenix had come from nowhere, and its weapons were beyond anything they had expected. However, the Empire was quick to react. A wave of firepower erupted from the massive warships, returning fire with overwhelming strength. "Shields at maximum," Kane commanded, his voice firm as the Phoenix shuddered from the first wave of enemy fire. The ship's energy shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact, but the strain on the ship was immense. "Direct hit to the port side," Vaughn shouted, her hands flying across the console. "We've lost power to the secondary engines. If they keep this up, we'll be sitting ducks." Kane's face twisted into a fierce grin. "Then we'll make sure they don't get the chance. Increase speed. Bring the Phoenix around to their flank." With expert precision, Kane maneuvered the Phoenix through the chaos of battle. The ship moved like a predator, dodging enemy fire and retaliating with deadly accuracy. The Empire's ships fired relentlessly, but the Phoenix was a force of nature, too fast, too powerful, and too unpredictable for them to counter. The human fleet rallied behind the Phoenix, encouraged by its power. Smaller ships regrouped, launching their own attacks, trying to draw the Empire's attention away from the Phoenix. It worked. The Empire's warships shifted their focus, leaving the Phoenix momentarily unscathed. But the Empire's reaction was swift. The remaining ships formed a tight formation, cutting off the Phoenix's retreat. Zorath saw his chance and gave the command for his fleet to move in. It would be a final confrontation. "Deploy the interceptors," Zorath ordered, his eyes glinting with malicious satisfaction. "Destroy the Phoenix. Destroy humanity's last hope." On the Phoenix, the tension was mounting. Kane could feel the pressure, the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. If they didn't act fast, it would be over. The Empire's numbers were too great, but the Phoenix had one last trick up its sleeve. "Prepare the hypernova cannon," Kane commanded. Vaughn's eyes widened. "Sir, that weapon's untested. We don't even know if it will work." "We don't have time for hesitation," Kane said, his voice cold as steel. "We fire everything we have now." The hypernova cannon was the Phoenix's ultimate weapon, an experimental energy weapon capable of firing a concentrated burst of energy that could obliterate entire fleets. The weapon had never been tested in actual combat, but now there was no choice. If they didn't unleash it, humanity would lose. The crew scrambled to bring the weapon online, rerouting all available power to the cannon's firing system. The Phoenix's core hummed with energy, a blue glow pulsing through the ship's hull. The Empire's interceptors began to surround the Phoenix, their smaller ships closing in with deadly intent. Kane's heart pounded in his chest. He had only one shot. Firing in 5, 4, 3. Kane counted down in his mind. The Phoenix shuddered as the hypernova cannon powered up, energy surging into the barrel of the weapon. The Empire's ships were closing in, but the Phoenix had locked its sights on the largest dreadnought in the fleet. "Now," Kane shouted. With a roar that shook the very fabric of space, the hypernova cannon fired. A massive beam of pure energy erupted from the Phoenix, tearing through the void like a sword of destruction. The blast collided with the Empire's dreadnought, disintegrating it in an instant. The shockwave sent out a rippling pulse of energy that slammed into surrounding ships, scattering them into debris. The Empire's fleet was thrown into chaos. They had never witnessed anything like it. The blast had obliterated their strongest warship, and the remaining ships were now scattered, vulnerable. But the battle was far from over. Kane knew that this was only a temporary victory. The Empire would regroup, and soon they would launch another assault. But for now, humanity had won a momentary reprieve. "Stay alert," Kane muttered, his grip tight on the helm. "We've only just begun." The Phoenix drifted through the wreckage of the Empire's once mighty fleet, its engines glowing faintly in the vast, empty space. The battle had taken its toll. The ship was battered, and the crew was weary. But the war was far from over. They had struck a blow to the Empire, but they had also drawn their attention. The fight would continue. Captain Marcus Kane stood on the command deck, staring out at the debris floating in the dark expanse of space. He could still hear the hum of the Phoenix's engines, but it felt like a distant echo compared to the thunderous roar of the hypernova cannon just moments ago. The Empire's dreadnought had been destroyed, but more were coming. Zorath, the Empire's merciless general, would not give up easily. The war had only just begun. "Captain," Lieutenant Vaughn said, stepping up beside him, "we've lost contact with several of the fleet's smaller ships. They might have been caught in the blast." Kane nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He had expected losses. The Phoenix had dealt a significant blow, but that didn't mean victory was assured. It only meant they had a chance. A chance to survive. A chance to strike back. "Prepare the fleet," Kane said. "We can't stay here. We need to move and find a secure position before the Empire regroups." Vaughn hesitated for a moment, studying his face. "Are we really going to keep fighting, Captain? After everything we've been through, is there still hope?" Kane looked out at the stars once more, his eyes narrowing. "There has to be. If we don't keep fighting, then everything we've sacrificed will have been for nothing. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or technology. It's our will to survive. And I refuse to let the Empire take that from us." Vaughn nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She turned to the crew, issuing orders to prepare for the next phase of the battle. As the fleet moved forward, the Empire's retaliation came swiftly. Zorath was no fool. He knew the Phoenix was dangerous, and he wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers. Despite the loss of his dreadnought, the Empire's forces quickly regrouped, forming a new strategy to confront the humans. They were determined to end the rebellion once and for all. The Phoenix moved swiftly, its engines burning with the intensity of a star. They didn't have much time. The Empire would be on them soon. Kane had a plan, but it was risky. They would need to strike while the Empire was still disoriented from the destruction of their flagship. It would be their only chance. "Captain," Vaughn said, approaching again, "we've identified an Empire supply ship in the vicinity. It's heavily guarded, but it could be our way to launch a surprise attack. We could cripple their supply lines and make it harder for them to continue their assault." Kane thought for a moment. It was a risky move, but it was the best option they had. "Set a course. We'll hit them before they can reinforce their fleet." The Phoenix turned sharply, and the fleet followed close behind. They were outnumbered, but they weren't going to let that stop them. This mission would be their chance to deal another blow to the Empire, and they couldn't afford to waste it. As they approached the supply ship, the Phoenix went into stealth mode, cloaking itself from the Empire's sensors. The smaller human ships moved ahead, drawing the attention of the Empire's patrol ships. It was the perfect distraction. The Empire's forces were too focused on the smaller ships to notice the Phoenix closing in. "Target locked," Vaughn reported. "We have a clean shot at the supply ship's engines. One hit, and they're out of commission." Kane's eyes flickered with determination. "Fire when ready." The Phoenix unleashed a barrage of precision strikes, hitting the supply ship's engines and weapon systems. The ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, sending debris flying into the void. The Empire's response was immediate. Ships began to move in to retaliate, but the human fleet had already scattered, using their speed to evade the incoming fire. "We're taking fire," a crew member shouted. The Phoenix shuddered as it absorbed multiple hits, but its shields held strong. The ship's powerful hull was designed to take such punishment, and Kane trusted it to protect them long enough to escape. "Move us out," Kane ordered. "Take evasive action. We've done our job. Now let's get out of here." The Phoenix and the rest of the fleet turned sharply, making their way toward the outer rim of the galaxy. They had struck at the Empire's supply lines, dealing a significant blow. But they couldn't stop now. They had to keep moving. As the Phoenix made its way toward the outer rim, Kane gathered his senior officers in the war room. The victory was significant, but it was only a small part of the greater war. They had to think bigger, plan smarter. "We've shown the Empire that we're not going to lie down and die," Kane said, addressing the officers. "But we're still outnumbered. We need to unite the galaxy's other factions. The Alliance of Free Worlds, the Targoth Rebels, the Andron Syndicate. Every faction we can find. We need them on our side." "Sir," Lieutenant Vaughn interrupted, "the Alliance has been hesitant to join the fight. They're too afraid of the Empire's retaliation." "They don't have a choice," Kane replied, his voice resolute. "If we don't stand together, the Empire will crush us all. We can't win this alone. We have to make them see that." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of Kane's words settled in. They all knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake: humanity's survival, and the survival of every free world in the galaxy depended on their ability to unite. "We'll send emissaries," Kane said finally. "We'll convince the leaders. If they're still afraid, we'll show them what we can do. Together, we'll bring the Empire down." As the officers filed out of the room, Kane stayed behind for a moment, staring out at the stars. The journey ahead would be long, and it would be fraught with danger. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. Humanity had the power to fight back, to change the galaxy's destiny. And they wouldn't stop until they had won. The Phoenix moved silently through the stars, its engines glowing brightly. The crew had done what was thought impossible. They had struck the Empire's heart. But the true war was just beginning. And this time, humanity was ready.